When it comes to describing the three major heroes in the original Star Wars trilogy, Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Princess Leia, it seems that they have clearly defined roles, at least from the perspective of fans. Luke Skywalker is the upstart, and Han Solo is the cool one. Leia is less defined, being positioned as sometimes a damsel in distress, being kidnapped by powerful enemies in both A New Hope and Return of the Jedi, but also a warrior considering she ends up aiding her own escape in both instances more than the others. But this isn't about Leia, that's another episode. This is about how fans view Han and Luke. Again, Luke is generally seen as geeky, whiny, but brave and forthright. Han is seen as an awesome pirate with the coolest ship in the galaxy. But do the popular images of these characters actually add up? And has our culture changed enough over time to alter our perspectives? Where does Han Solo get this reputation? What is it that he does that makes him considered the cool one? It seems to be common knowledge that Solo is the tough guy, and Luke Skywalker is not. But in terms of overall effectiveness and importance, there is no competition. Let's look at the major accomplishments and enemies defeated by both Luke Skywalker and Han Solo side by side. Luke Skywalker destroyed the Death Star by communing with the Force, trusting his instincts, turning off his targeting sensors, and firing a shot into a ventilation shaft. He single-handedly saved the Rebel base from complete annihilation, not to mention that this saved future worlds from suffering the same fate as Alderaan. Han Solo shot Greedo from under the table when he wasn't looking, killing an unimportant bounty hunter. Luke Skywalker came up with the idea to save Princess Leia and sneak into the prison section of the Death Star. Han Solo shot Darth Vader's TIE fighter from behind when he couldn't defend himself. Seems to be a pattern. Luke Skywalker defeated Darth Vader man-to-man in a lightsaber battle, absolutely crushing his father. Han Solo defeated Boba Fett. Sort of. Solo was blind, so he accidentally bumped into him. Really, the Sarlacc killed Boba Fett, but Solo gets an asterisk here for the assist. Luke Skywalker defeated a 50-foot monster in the bowels of Jabba's palace. Han Solo tapped some guy on the shoulder and ran. Yeah. Admittedly, Solo does save Luke on Hoth, and Luke returns the favor at Jabba's palace, and we can do some calculations, but the bare facts here clearly favor Luke as being instrumental in bringing down the Empire, and Han Solo as being a pirate who shoots people when they aren't looking. Yet despite this, Han Solo is generally considered to be the tough guy. One could argue he is doing more with less, and this will undoubtedly come up when people make their counter-argument to this, but he doesn't actually do much at all in the trilogy. He has a high ranking in the Rebellion, but we don't really see him do much in terms of strategy either. And he can't seem to keep the Millennium Falcon running. Chewbacca seems to know more about engineering than Solo. In fact, nearly all the other characters are more effective. Lando Calrissian destroys the second Death Star. That's more important than anything Han Solo ever did. Leia strangles Jabba the Hutt to death. That's a more significant kill than Boba Fett or Greedo. Even Darth Vader, who spends 99% of the trilogy aiding the dark side, deals a more significant blow to the Empire than Han Solo ever did by killing Palpatine. We do tend to love the tough guy character instead of the leader or principal character. People adore Wolverine even though Cyclops and Professor X are the leaders of the X-Men, but Wolverine actually is hugely effective. Han Solo just isn't on that level. He's not that good, and he has been mistakenly understood to be the cool tough guy when he doesn't do much that's particularly cool or tough. But anyway, this isn't about whether Han Solo can find his butt with 2 hands and a flashlight. This is about Luke Skywalker. So let's talk about what people think are the common problems with Luke as a character, and get to the heart of all of this. One of the biggest complaints about Luke Skywalker is that he has too much handed to him. He's the chosen one, and if action-adventure fantasy movies are doing one thing way too much, it's making the protagonist the chosen one. Everything from Harry Potter to the Lego movie. The one hero destined to save the day, and if someone is predestined to be amazing, then they can't really mess it up. They don't have to work for it. We like this fantasy not because we can relate to it, but because we want to relate to it. We want there to be something special about us that nobody else can see. We like the idea that despite our humble beginnings, we may be fated to do much more. We know that due to the prequels, Luke's father Anakin was prophesied to bring balance to the Force, whatever that means. That means Anakin is the real chosen one, but that Luke obviously must be part of this divine plan too. Further, we know that if midichlorians are genetic, Luke must have all the natural potential to do whatever he wants once Obi-Wan Kenobi tells him about the Force. So yes, that's an argument against Luke Skywalker being relatable, but that was not how he was originally written. This was woefully added decades later in the prequels. Luke, as we see him in the original Star Wars trilogy, attains his power through hard work and dedication. He gets a crash course from Obi-Wan in A New Hope, and then he goes to Dagobah to train under Master Yoda throughout The Empire Strikes Back. His training is not complete until the third film, Return of the Jedi. In other words, genetic gifts or not, Luke's accomplishments are his own, not the result of high midichlorian count. He worked for it. Yes, he looks like he put in the password for God mode, and too much power sometimes makes a character no more fun, but he earned those powers. Plus, even after all that Jedi training, he still can't beat Emperor Palpatine on his own. This is not a drawback though. The point is, Luke is relatable because he has humble beginnings, admirable because he works hard to achieve his successes, but not so perfect that we should ignore his struggles, because the very end of Return of the Jedi shows his vulnerable side. It's a great balance. The other big complaint about Luke Skywalker when comparing him to Han Solo is that Luke is kind of a whiny kid at the beginning of A New Hope. Well, of course he is, because Luke is just a kid, but that makes his journey into manhood and responsibility that much better. If his story was already told at the start, he wouldn't have an arc. Luke from A New Hope is very different from Luke in Return of the Jedi. This brings us to another area in which Luke Skywalker trumps Han Solo. Luke actually has an arc that lasts throughout the trilogy. Han Solo's arc begins and ends in the first movie. He's a smuggler who only cares about himself. Then, at the tail end of the movie, he comes back to help the rebellion for about 10 seconds. Han Solo graduated from selfish pirate to generous pirate. The rest of his story is just about courting Princess Leia and misunderstanding the word scoundrel. Luke's arc begins when he stares off into the distance at two suns in one of the simplest yet greatest scenes in movie history. It continues when he learns about the Force, loses his mentor, fights for the rebellion, trains in the Force, defeats Darth Vader, and resists the dark side despite the powerful temptations. His arc is not complete until he opens up his black shirt at the end to symbolically reveal that he was a card-carrying member of the light side of the Force the whole time. Han's arc is lighter than this, shorter. He has a big role to play in the larger plot of Star Wars, yes, but his character development, his big change, happens in A New Hope. Luke's big changes build across the trilogy. His journey is greater and more interesting to watch. Now, with all of this in mind, all of Luke Skywalker's struggles, victories, and development over 3 movies, does that actually make him cooler? Well, for that matter, what is cool? Since fashionistas, trendsetters, and every high school student wanting to fit in is still desperately trying to figure that out, let's break this down into simple parameters based on time periods. George Lucas was born in 1944, which means his recollections of what was cool is firmly entrenched in the time he was a teenager, the 50s. Now, what was the standard of cool in the 50s? James Dean, motorcycles, fast cars, characters who show their coolness through disinterest.
Hey Johnny, what are you rebelling against?
What do you got?
This comes through in arguably Lucas's best non-Star Wars film, American Graffiti. It's about fast cars and showing how tough you are even if you aren't. To Lucas, that's cool.
Am I cool, kids?
No.
Good, I'm glad. And that's what makes me cool. Not caring, right?
No.
Han Solo is positioned to be the cool character because that's what Lucas grew up on. That's what was considered cool, disinterest, being aloof. Contrarily, being passionate about something is considered geeky. Enter Luke Skywalker. He's a geek. He's a kid that doesn't entirely know what he's doing at the beginning of the story, and as soon as he's told about the Force, he adamantly defends it against the more cynical Han Solo 5 minutes later like it's instantly his new religion. Classic geek behavior. With this said, how can one possibly argue for Luke as a character who is cooler than Han Solo? Well, because trends change over time. What we consider fashionable is altered with each passing day, and the embodiment of cool is not quite what it was in the 50s. Western culture has changed, especially with the advent of the internet. James Dean passed away almost 60 years ago. He was the standard in cool. Was the standard in being considered cool now? This. Being a geek is now part of being cool. The following are things that were considered a social death sentence and terribly uncool in the late 20th century. Computers, superheroes, gadgets, Star Trek, thick black glasses. Now these are all massively successful in the mainstream. Society has shifted. Everyone has a computer, superheroes dominate popular culture, The Big Bang Theory is one of the biggest shows on television, and Abed is the most likable character on Community. Luke Skywalker is now cool because he is the kind of person who, if he lived in our world, would really, really love Star Wars. Maybe Luke Skywalker is not the upstart or the cool one. Maybe he's the upstart and the cool one. Something to think about. Or dismiss outright. Whatever. Want to help Renegade Cut get bigger and better? Check out my Patreon page and see the goals for the show, like getting rid of mid-rolls and making this my full-time job. Even a tiny donation earns you something from me, and a larger donation gets you even more. It's basically a system of ongoing pledges to make the show last longer and improve. Check it out today. Thanks.